Some know him as Jreg, some know him as Jreg, some know him as Junior Egg, some know him as J Regular, but I know him as friend Greg. Greg is a YouTuber with his main channel, Jreg. On his second channel, he talks a lot about being an artist and creativity. So that's what he and I had a conversation about. Creativity, art. What does it take to actually be creative and get your work out there? And in the spirit of our conversation, this video is not edited. Greg, he drops a couple swear words. There's just the S word, and he does say, I'm sorry, after he does it. So it's like no big deal. Does it even count if I don't say it on the channel? Like, it's probably fine. Just thought I'd point that out since I don't swear in my videos, people might be shocked. So here you go, unedited, me and Greg. I need infinity frames per second.
Yeah, and then you can like slow it up or speed it down as you need.
I used to be very opposed to 60 frames a second, and I was like, it looks bad. Ugh. And now I shoot everything at 60 frames per second because I feel like it looks bad. I think, you know, it's like, it's weird because it's like fewer frames per second. When you get to 24, it makes us think cinema. So it's like, ooh, but then I realized like these comedy YouTubers are in 60 frames a second, which makes it, it gives it that, you know, that low art edge to it. You know, I was watching Caleb City and he does everything in 60 frames per second, but then he had one random one where it was in 24 frames per second. And I was like, what are you doing, dude? Like, what are you trying to be better than you are? Like, I don't appreciate that.
Do you think he even did that consciously, or he just like didn't even realize what setting the camera was on?
I have a feeling he didn't know what setting the camera was
on. Because like, if that's the case for me, like I'm not aware of what FPS I'm shooting on most of the time. I just turn the camera on and I go.
Yeah, which is crazy. Like JJ is the same way. He doesn't know anything about his camera, and I'm like a gear guy, so I'm like in all the granular settings. I'm shooting everything in like 4:3 ratio, 5K. Like
that's a symptom of high conscientiousness, Frank James.
Who would have known? I scored 1% conscientiousness.
Yeah, well, the tests are bad. The tests, so you're clearly conscientious, and Jay is associated with high conscientiousness.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was JBP's test. He failed.
Yeah, well, because the problem with conscientiousness is it's both like industriousness and then it's like self-reported cleanliness, which are like kind of different things.
Right, and the other weird part of it is like rule following and like the importance of if you should follow the rules or not, where it's like, I'm a big rule follower, but I just don't, you know, keep things organized. As soon as you get out of frame here, it's just a pile of stuff. So,
yeah. Interesting. The gear guys are, they're important, but you know, it's kind of good that we were talking about this earlier. It's good that it's freeing us up to less focus on gear and more just focus on content, the new developments in technology and such, because it lets you be more high level in the ideas that you're working with instead of just tinkering around with the computer too much.
Yeah. Wait. So you think the gear lets you be more high level, or the other stuff?
The technology, the AI stuff, for example, like, you know, there's the new thing that you can like have really shitty audio, really bad audio. Sorry, I shouldn't swear. This is a family friendly podcast. Really bad audio, and then the AI will just like figure out what your voice sounds like and like make it sound good.
Yeah, actually, my editor used that in Premiere because I recorded a video on my iPhone, and it was like, because I was like, I was doing an experiment where I thought to myself, nobody cares. So I just shot it on the iPhone, and the audio was the worst part of it. And the AI was able to like, it brought a weird quality to it that it was pretty good, but it also made me sound slightly like someone else. I also had a cold while I was doing it, so it made it sound like the cold was even worse than it was. But it's great. Yeah, I thought it was.
Hey everybody, it's me, Frank James, except slightly different from than you remember me, and extremely sick, like dying. Yeah.
I need to make this video to pay for my medical bills. Because that's in America, we have to pay for our medical bills.
True. Whereas in Canada, we just die.
You just die.
Or they kill you. They give you a little injection.
Right. Yeah.
Every night, no more being a burden on the healthcare system. Thank you, government. Anyway, okay, let's bring this cast to the original purpose, which is
Yeah.
I need to talk about trying to be a coaching guy in my art profession.
Yeah.
So here, maybe you can help me with this, Frank James.
Sure.
Maybe you can be my therapist. So
that's what I do. Yeah.
So I've been encouraging people to make art my whole life. I've been helping people figure out their artistic goals and like working through them. And it in a way, it's kind of like an art therapy sort of thing.
Yeah.
So like I'm talking to them about the kinds of things that are preventing them from making art, like their own internal resistance, the things that are preventing them from making the kinds of art that they want to create. Like, oh, maybe my mom would not like it and I can't do it because of that or whatever. And I this is something I really love to do. It's something that I'd like to do as a job. But at the same time, when it comes down to making a formal pitch to my audience and saying, this is what I'm going to provide you, and this is what we're going to do, and this is a serious thing that I'm serious about, I have trouble. I have trouble bringing myself to say, this is a service that's going to be worth your time. So that's basically where I'm at. What do you think about that?
Well, there are multiple layers that could be at work here. Is the issue asking the audience for their money? Is the issue the feeling that it could be that, and once they give me the money, they will be like, this was not worth that much?
I'm actually not worried about that second part. I think once we start doing the calls regularly, I'm positive people will have a good experience, because I've done this with people before and they've always had a good experience. They've always said that this is like very helpful for them. We did a kind of micro example of that in terms of incorporating a new medium. We did, yeah. With you seem to like it.
Yes, you coached me through it. And it was like measurable positive results that had I paid for it, it would have been worth it.
Okay, well, I'm going to clip this out of context for my.
Had I paid for it, it would have been worth it.
Yeah. Because I've been doing it for free for my friends, basically, because it's just something that I do naturally. Like it's something that in a vacuum, I just can't help myself but do it. Like if someone mentions an artistic project that they're working on to me, I have no choice. I have no choice but to say, if you're serious about that, you're going to tell me when it's going to get done right now. And that's the sort of strategy that I use, which is like I give them deadlines, they give themselves deadlines and I hold them to their own deadline. So I just try to figure out what makes sense to them. So I'm not imposing anything. I'm just saying, like, I'm going to make you take yourself seriously. And that's a big part of what art is. It's like you can take your own artistic perspective seriously enough to make that art. But a lot of people don't believe in themselves enough to make that art happen. And sometimes they just need a little bit of an external push. And I'm very happy. My goal eventually is to just be that sort of role. And that's the sort of sincere role in a world where, like, I'm typically, my presence online is more of an ironic thing, you know?
Yeah. So in an ironic twist, is the issue here that you are like struggling to take yourself seriously in that role of being coach?
Yeah. I think that's a big part of it. It's just like being fully sincere. Like I've sold things before in an ironic capacity, and that's fine. I felt good about that. Like I sold Jreg coin, which is like 100, like basically fake NFTs, like emails for $50 each. That sold out in like an hour. And that was fine, because like that was just an ironic thing. I wasn't offering myself in a sincere capacity. But for me to do this, it feels very outside of my comfort zone. Yeah, so that's just that. Yeah, that's kind of a true observation that you made. Ironic. It's very ironic.
Well, I mean, I think though the thing is that you'd be selling this mainly through your second channel, which focuses on these kind of things. And your second channel there is no lack of irony, but I think the people who watch that channel get it. Like they understand what's going on better than maybe your average viewer on the main channel would.
Yeah, although there is some there are some people who still like, what, this is just this is just something I like to play with on YouTube, is like, if you post something where you're clearly in character, because of the way that all the videos work, people will think that you're being genuine, because there will always be new people coming in through recommended that,
Right.
oh, this person is serious. So I made, to my mind, which was like a very obvious parody of like a red pill person who like just gets mad at women, basically.
Right.
But there's still people who are like, this is so true. You're like, so true, even though it's like, women, I don't like them.
Yeah. I saw that video. It was like, what, 5 things I learned in my 20s.
5 life lessons I learned in my 20s. So the point of that video is like, I say like, the point of that video is that wisdom and advice always comes from an egoistic perspective. Like it's someone who has had some things happen to them, and now they're generalizing it and making it into like this big thing that everyone needs to know. That's like the source of all advice. So obviously, if someone has been like had a traumatic relationship experience, all of their relationship advice is going to be from that perspective, which is like kind of a meta way of sorting through or filtering through advice. So that was like the point of that video. But like, yeah, you're right. There's no shortage of irony on that channel either.
Yeah. But I mean, well, yeah, you're right that like the people who are just like stumbling upon it, they won't get it. But it's like, you know, I have the second channel. I presume that this video will go up on my second channel. And it's like the people who are there really want to be there. Although now that I'm talking through it, I'm like, yeah, but there are probably a lot of people there who wouldn't get it if I made some kind of higher level character. But that's what's so frustrating is like you make it within a YouTube video, you make it where it's like, this is clearly the point, but then people like mangle it and get another point out of it.
Yeah, I've sort of just embraced that that's a part of the internet. Like, so by doing what we call a post-ironic, meta-ironic kind of aesthetic, you can sort of make it so that if someone believes that it's one way, then they're right. But if they kind of believe it in another way, they're also right, because you were intending it. You were sort of building in both of those realities into the work. And so that's what I try to do.
Right. Yeah. Which I mean, I appreciate that, because it for the people who get it all together, it's very satisfying because they see the layers and they're like, oh, dude, some people stopped at this layer, but I got it all the way. Like I am big brain over here. And it's also hard to do, but it's and I think that it's something you do very well. Your channel often reminds me of it's like Andy Kaufman-esque in a way, sort of a lot of the high level concept stuff that you do, where it's clearly sometimes the joke is just in seeing the title and thumbnail. Like you don't even have to watch the video. Just conceptually, you're like, oh man, that's really creative and good. But then you actually go through and execute it, which is where, you know, the artistic respect I have for you is like, oh man, he didn't just have the idea. He didn't just, you know, do some kind of like clickbait thing. It was what you think it is. And yeah. So then I guess going back to the question is, what's your deal with the coaching? Let me turn on a light also. Let's shed some light on this. Do I look better now? What
it looks good before, you look good now.
I want to show that I am, you know, bright. So have you identified what the hang up is with the coaching and wanting to present yourself? Is it the coaching, or is it the sincerity bit? As I think earplug back in.
It's a mixture of like the sincerity, like, you know, doing something sincerely. It's a, you know, asking for money in the sense, like, you know, being like, okay, this is a good enough service that, and my time is worthwhile enough to actually charge for this. That's a part of it. And then another part of it is like, there's like this Hustler University stuff online where you pay some amount of money and you get basically just like these pre-recorded modules or stuff like that. And like, that's not what I'm offering at all. It's like a one-on-one sort of talk and more of a deeper relationship, deeper mentorship sort of relationship. And now that I'm thinking about it, maybe I'll just cut up this podcast and make this the ad, and that would work better. Because like I think that's probably the thing is like impromptu. Like I can explain the value pretty clearly when I'm just talking to somebody, but like apropos of nothing, talking about it seems a little more. It's like a little bit more uncomfortable for me.
Yeah, well, especially because it's like there is the implicit like, hey, I turned on the camera with the intent of saying this to you so that you will, buy this service.
Yeah.
Whereas, when you're just talking to someone in a conversation, it's like, well, this is, it's natural for me to bring it up. There's no behind the scenes. It's just like, here's what it is.
Yeah, I think also there's big shame in a lot of artists have a lot of shame about making money off of anything. They view it as like sort of I don't know impure. Like it ruins the integrity of the art. Can't be an integral person with you're making money somehow. But there's really no way around it, especially in the modern day. Like you got to do it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you got to be able to live, and that's one of the problem is when the money becomes a competing factor with like what are you gonna do or like what you choose to produce, which is the thing that I struggle with, and which is one of the things I talked about you when you were giving me my free coaching session is I was like the specific circumstance was I was feeling kind of burned out. I didn't really enjoy a lot of the videos I was making, but then I was making an ad for BetterHelp. And I was like, dude, I'm so into this. Why do I care? Like, this is wrong. Why am I so like, I felt artistically fulfilled making a commercial basically. And I'm like, why don't I feel that for like the stuff that's mine? Well, I'm shilling for a brand and I feel better about it. And a lot of it is just the thing where it's like, hey, it's my job. So the success or failure of the art goes beyond just like validation. It's also like, I don't get paid if this video doesn't do well. And then with YouTube, especially, there is and I'm sure it's like this with many other arts that you could do for a living, is the worry that one failure is just the beginning of the slide into, this isn't going to work out. And so then it's just like mounting pressure ultimately because of the money, but that's like secondary to the success of the art. But it's ultimately the reason why it was easier to do the commercial is because there was no failing. Like they were going to pay me no matter how it turned out. It didn't matter if people liked it. It didn't matter if people watched. I got the money either way. So there's no failure, which unlocked my ability to do whatever I wanted. And so I was able to like get into that flow state, if you will, where I could just, work several hours on a 60-second segment. So that's just an illustration of you walked me through that. That was an illustration of how you can how you helped me and dealing with that money aspect on my end.
Oh well, I'm very happy to hear it.
My life has improved dramatically since.
Okay, excellent. That's going in the ad.
Only the insincere bits make it in.
Just when you're not being sincere, I'll put that in. I think that's how I feel about YouTube as well. The instability, the complete instability, where like if you get like a poor performing video, you're like, well, this is the beginning of the end.
Yeah.
And you just see your whole future in front of you, and just like until you're getting like 15 views a video.
Right. Yeah.
And then that coupled with the money thing. I mean, I really should be. This just reminds me, I should really be taking more sponsorships. I got to a point where I was like, I don't want to take sponsorships anymore. But in retrospect, it's just nice to be able to be like, okay, no matter what happens, I'm making this amount of money from the video, and my time is going to be rewarded, instead of sort of like, well, I shouldn't have even made this video because now my next video is going to do worse because of my analytics, blah, blah, blah. YouTube really is sometimes a real torturous experience.
Yeah. It's like, well, I know like one of my least favorite things is YouTubers complaining about being YouTubers, but it is like easy to do because when you're on this side of it, you're like, sometimes it just feels like, what do I have? I'm the dancing monkey over here, but it's not good enough. Like, what else do I need to do to make this work like it used to work, or to grow or whatever?
It is often this painful process of realizing that you need to try something different. And that's a little bit of what we talked about, like incorporating a different medium or trying a different way, like just using that as the impetus to force yourself to change and try something different. But it's hard to do, and like change is always a bit of death, and like that's why it's painful, is because you're dying a little bit.
Yeah, that's true, especially in this specific circumstance where change means leaving behind the familiar of something works or used to work. Even if it's not working, you're like, it used to work, maybe it'll work again. And so then going out on a limb, especially if you've done it before and it didn't work out, it makes you like, oh man, this feels very precarious. But if I guess who would you hope to reach with the coaching? Because I feel like not every, like, I can't imagine that you want to reach just a bunch of other YouTubers. Like, you're probably a lot of people who are just getting started or who are doing this as a side job while they have a regular job. So who are you most looking to connect with these coaching calls, and like what do you hope that, or ideally what do you think that their direction would be, like to become full-time artists, or just to become better artists, or to just whatever they want? Like what do you have in mind?
Yeah, I think my goal originally with the giving advice to artists and stuff is just like, I'm basically just yelling at myself when I turn the camera on. I'm looking at myself in the viewfinder. I'm like, listen up, you need to do your work. You need to sit down. You need to be better as a person. Or something. But so when I think about the kinds of people I want to reach, it's like, I mean, I'm giving myself basically my past self advice a lot of the time. And so
exactly,
it is people who are like in my scenario, in my circumstance when I was younger, where like I really, 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 more than anything else, wanted to just make a living off of my art. And I would do anything to get there because that's all I wanted to do. And nothing else made me happy. And that's probably a symptom of a larger problem, but let's ignore that for now. So it's people, I think, that, and I'm also just happy to talk about art to anybody in any circumstance, whether they're like very well experienced and they're like making it already, but they just need a little bit of help, which was your situation, or someone who's just completely brand new. But really, like, I want someone who is sort of in the middle and they have projects that they've completed before, which means that they're capable of doing more projects like that. They're not a total like lost cause, but they just have like procrastination issues. They've been working on a novel for like 2 years with no end in sight, and they haven't heard about things like setting yourself tangible deadlines, and they have never had anyone in their life that cares about them enough to actually hold them accountable to their own goals. Because most people don't care. Most people don't sit down with you and ask you about your project and tell you to like think it out, define it, make sure it makes sense, set yourself actionable deadlines so you actually complete the project. Most people are like, oh, you're working on a novel. Oh, that's cool. And then that's it. Like that's 99.9% of people. But if you actually want to finish your novel, you need to feel at least as though there's one other person that cares about it. A lot of the time. I mean, you can just sit alone by yourself, getting no feedback about it, no information about how to market it, no sort of mentorship whatsoever. But that's a very lonely, isolating, atomizing experience that I don't think is conducive to making good art.
Right. Yeah. That's very true, because most people aren't creative, or at least they haven't tapped into the creativity, and so they just don't get it. So if you say you're doing, or it's like maybe they get it, but they just don't want to like pry, they don't want to interfere with your process, or maybe even they are a creative person, but they haven't, they don't feel like that's the right thing to do, to be like, dude, you need to do this. They're more like, do whatever you want, man, just feel it out, just find the inspiration. And it's because it's not intuitive. Talking about, you mentioned the big five earlier, if whether we edit that out or not. Like, artists tend to be high in openness to experience but low in conscientiousness, and so they have all these ideas. They can come up with a bunch of moving art and not do it because they don't have that conscientiousness to like set a deadline, to do one thing at a time, to work on something else than the dopamine hit of getting into the flow, you know? Because inspiration, to me, it's really just like you have an idea and then your brain gives you some dopamine. And you're like, oh, that's a good idea. And then you start to work on it and your brain just keeps giving you that high. And you can't rely on that because it's not going to be there all the time.
Yeah. Many such cases. I actually, I think low conscientiousness people, because I'm low conscientiousness, like that, I think there's a good fit there. But also one of my clients, one of my friends, because I have been doing this for a while, and I have a regular calls with one of my friends. And he's actually very high conscientiousness. And what we work on is actually getting him to lower his standard of quality a little bit so that he can actually get stuff out. So I've been holding him to a getting something out every few weeks, and he says he's the most productive he's ever been in his whole life, and he like really likes actually like being able to get more things out, because at the rate he was going, he was making great stuff, but like only like one good thing a year, which was not quick enough to actually make sure that he makes it as an artist before he dies, which is my goal for him.
Right.
So it works both ways in the conscientiousness thing.
That's true. Yeah. Because if you get to perfectionism, it's very easy to like never do anything.
Yeah.
Because likewise, you're not ever satisfied. You're not getting that dopamine hit, and you're like, oh, this is, I better just like leave it. Better to keep working on it. Although the one interesting thing, and I'd like to hear what you think about this, is the idea, like the amount of stuff that a person can produce, like how prolific someone is, the speed at which you work, because on YouTube, it encourages like a very rapid output. Like you can't stop.
Yeah.
And for me, it's like, this is getting too fast, especially because I've released like, 2-3 videos a week for a while.
Yeah. And you have a crazy schedule. Like you're one of the most productive YouTubers I know.
Yeah, well, I mean, I look busy. That's so. I guess so. The question is like, how do you dial into the right frequency? How do you know if you're working too fast, too slow? Is just the enjoyment of what you're doing enough? Because I remember, it might even be apocryphal, a quote from the author Donna Tartt, who wrote The Goldfinch. She releases like one book every 10 years. And she's like, if you're not enjoying writing, you're writing too fast. But I feel like one book every 10 years might be a little slow. I don't know. So how would you approach that with someone who's like struggling to find their tempo?
Right. I think that you have to take into account your internal motivations and your external motivations. So like internally, you don't want to burn out. So if the process is not working out for you, if you feel bad about it, then you're going to burn out eventually. But if it's something that you could do, even if you weren't making any money on it, then that's like, you could do that indefinitely. You could do that forever. Like there are just some things I could do forever. I wouldn't want to. Like I could probably play video games until I die, but that wouldn't be good for me. But I could, and I would never burn out from playing video games. But then there's also your external validation, which is the 1 out of 10 on YouTube. You get the pew or whatever.
Oh yeah.
Or you're like a painter. Maybe you sell your painting for like a high price. Money, external success. That's all other stuff. So like, there is a balance between the internal and the external, I would say. There are some people who are fully internally motivated. I actually know some YouTubers like this, and I think it's bad because you can get so internally motivated. You're creating like this big story in your head, this big world of ideas, and then maybe people just aren't interested in that world you're creating. You fall to the wayside, and then you can't do it full time anymore. On the other end, you have people who are purely externally motivated, and then they become completely interchangeable because they're just filling a market niche. And it's like, oh, well, the world needs videos about bubblegum, and I'll make those videos, even though there's nothing really about me that you're coming for. It's just the bubblegum videos. So you want to strike a balance. You want to like, I am this person, and I like talking about this, and this is my thing, but also here's this value that I can provide for you. And I think you fill that niche. I think you fill that niche very well. And I aim to fill that niche as well. Try to be, sustainable for myself, but also provide value, provide like this is something that will actually make your life better. It's not just noise, not just more noise on the internet of the endless noise. It's something that will bring you actual value or make you think. And like good art is exactly that. It makes you think, it makes you change your mind on things, and it brings value to your life. I like to think.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think even if it's well, I guess that also brings up the question of the line between entertainment and art. But it's like, yeah, what's the point in producing something if it's not going to bring something to someone? You know, if someone's not going to feel something, or at least if they're not going to laugh, if people don't feel like their time was well spent consuming it, then what's the point?
But we both have extroverted feeling, Frank James. So maybe this is all just a bunch of nonsense.
Yeah.
we're both at least a little focused on providing social value to others and stuff like that. So
yeah, it's really hard to turn that off. To not feel like I'm just, oh, what do people want to do? Let me do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the things about YouTube is I think it's going too far towards that, like just do whatever it is to get the views. And it's like what some people have called like the Mr. Beastification of YouTube, where it's like everyone sees he's getting views. Let me do what he does. Of course, you can't do it unless you have a lot of money. But then it's like what you said, you just become interchangeable with a bunch of other people because you can do the same formula, but it doesn't matter unless you can bring something unique to the table. And I mean, that's something I've been thinking about a lot. I'm glad you brought that up. Just like, how do I be more myself in the work I do? Because I feel like I'm just constantly trying to like figure out how to be other people, how to like replicate what other people do. Like, do you feel that way ever? Or how much do you struggle with being yourself? Which way do you skew, more towards being too much yourself or not enough?
I think I might be too much myself to a detrimental point a lot of the time. And I often think about like, I should have just, kept making the stuff that I know would do well instead of doing all this weird avant-garde shit that maybe people don't like as much. Stuff. Sorry. Oh, God. Too much swearing on this family-friendly podcast.
Oh my God.
Shoot. I started thinking about how you don't swear, Frank James. It's very, very endearing, very wholesome. Even in your videos, when you're swearing, you just go shoot and then you bleep it out.
Yeah.
Sorry, I lost track of what I was saying.
Be too much yourself when you could have just.
I think I probably am. But at the same time, I like to think that the strategy I think that's worked for me is like no matter what I'm doing, even if it's sort of just like a chair list video, which is I know going to have like a wide appeal, just bring myself into the art. Whatever I'm doing, I'll bring a bit of art to it. I'll bring a bit of my own artistic brand to whatever I'm doing, and it doesn't matter the structure of the frame. I can always bring a bit of my soul into it, and hopefully that soul will shine through, and people will notice that. I don't know if that works, but that's been my idea. That's been the strategy.
Yeah, I mean, and you've done a lot of shifting around on YouTube because you had a pretty established, it was a pretty established niche, like talking about the political stuff. A lot of people it was very analogous to what I do, where it's like personality types, except it was like political personality types.
Yeah.
And then you shifted away from that and haven't really gone back. I mean, you've kind of like gone near it. You've kind of gone adjacent to it a few times. So what was behind, because that's like, a risky move, but it seems like it came from a point of like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I've exhausted this, or it's like, what else is there to say? So what went through your mind when you were changing there?
Yeah, well, what I'll say is I still have a lot of complicated thoughts about what I did there. But yeah, I didn't, I know what I am, and I'm an artist, and I don't want to be known for one thing. And I don't want to just keep myself in one box. And so I sort of did introduce this idea of like going through different eras on my channel and trying different things out. At the same time, though, I did like talking about politics, and I do think a lot about just making like a separate channel where I can put all the political stuff and just sort of compartmentalize it. And I know that would do well. I know people would like it. I know I would like doing it. But then I can keep my main channel for just higher level artistic projects. I've thought about that a lot. But I don't know. I feel like I would make the channel and then I would just like lose interest in it in like a month, and then I just have another dead channel floating around. But I don't know. That's something I've been thinking about a lot recently, because I have a lot of like, a lot of political stuff that I want to talk about still, but it's hard to just talk about politics for me, because for me, everything is everything else. So like politics is mental illness, is atomization, is, gender frameworks, is political frameworks, is it's all this stuff is like intimately connected, is like youth culture, is irony, is like Gen Z politics, blah, 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 all this.
Yeah.
So it's hard to just talk about one thing. And that's been my problem. I think the overarching theme that I try to stick to is like frameworks, like ways of interpreting reality in the world. And, personality is one of those frameworks as well, right? Like, so it's just ways of like cutting through the noise and seeing the world in a certain way. And I find that interesting because I have a hard time cutting through the noise. I mostly just see noise. So that's been my interest. And that's, I think, a low conscientiousness probably a trait or something like that. I don't know, but
it very well could be. Do you like when you, so you're the first big hit you had was the Political Compass rap, right?
Yeah.
So when you made that, apologies for not doing my podcastly host duties. Was that sort of like, oh, this is a big hit, let me continue talking about this? Had you been talking about politics up to that point? Was there intent behind, hey, I'm stepping into this niche? Or was it like, oh, I can ride this wave? Like, how did that happen? Because I know a lot of times it seems like when I look at a lot of channels, people kind of just stumble onto what they end up doing forever after that.
Yeah, I mean, like that's basically what happened. Is I had like this other political video called Anti-Centrism before that, and then I did the Political Compass rap, and then people would find the old political video, and I seem to have been stumbling upon something that like no one else was doing in the political sphere, so I decided to just pursue that. But I also was very conscious as soon as that happened that like that's how a lot of YouTubers get started, and they get stuck in doing something that they don't necessarily want to do forever. And so I did try to make a conscious effort to shift away from that at a certain point. So I was like, I'm going to do my web series, and at the end of my web series, I'm going to try to shift away. And so that's what I did. Yeah, so it was kind of an intentional thing. Like I was like, and that's why I do recommend to artists a lot. Like when they're just starting off, try as many different things as possible. Like move laterally as much as possible. Try different topics as much as possible, because you never know what's going to hit. And then when you hit, like you're basically trying. You're like a mad scientist experimenting with like 100 different chemicals. And then when you find 2 chemicals that you mix together that work, okay, now you can start decomposing the chemicals and like getting really deep, digging vertically into that ground that you've just discovered is fertile, right? And that's what I did. So yeah, that's what I would recommend to people who are just starting off.
Yeah, I mean that's I would say, even because you talked about this in one of your videos on the second channel about moving laterally, where it's like some people go really deep with something that's just not working because they haven't tried anything, and the trying a bunch of different stuff is, a lot of times the solution to that. Or even like in my case, the example I brought up earlier, it's like I tried a different series on my channel that wasn't that different than what I had been doing. It was just like slightly to the side of it, and it worked out.
Right.
So what is how do you find the balance there? I feel like all my questions are like, how do you find the balance between these two extremes?
Well, I'm a synchronist, so that's great. I'm all about balancing extremes.
Yeah. But it's like the extreme between, if I stick to this long enough, I'll get it to work out. I like not quitting before you've given it a try, but also like trying a bunch of different stuff. And of course, it's different. Like it's hard to get out of the YouTube mindset for me, at least. For me and of course, this is going to be on YouTube, so a lot of times things just refer back to how do you make a channel. Yeah, no, I have that exact problem where I'm trying to like give generalized art advice. And then I'm like, oh, I'm just talking about being a YouTuber. Yeah, it's like it's hard to this stuff solidifies in your brain before you even realize it. And
Yeah, and I'm trying to make my art advice like applicable to as many different kinds of people as possible. But at the same time, that's kind of why I made that that advice video on my second channel, where I was just like, obviously my advice was just coming from my own personal experience, or like whatever this character's personal experience is, because like that's where all advice comes from, and sometimes it's more obvious than not. But yeah, how do you strike that balance? I don't know. I mean, I think for me, completing a big project in that sphere is kind of like a good way to cap it off. So like I did a web series, and like I finished the web series, and that was a big thing for me, because like I followed a lot of things on the internet that never got finished, like web comics and stuff like that would just like end abruptly because they went on for like 12 years. And I was like, no, I'm going to finish this. And so I finished the series, and then I'm like, okay, it's time to consciously move on to something else. At the same time, it might be something like maybe you get get started on something, and then you allow it to like continue in a way where you're like, it's like financially sustainable or something, like it can run itself, and then you can like go and do some stuff on the side and plant some more seeds and see if you can get another hit. But you're not as worried this time around, because you've got your main successful thing providing your brand and stuff. And I think, and if I regret anything, it's just like, I probably should have just made a second channel immediately and just like kept posting political stuff on like a new channel or something, and tried to keep that running, and like made my merch over there, so that I wouldn't be so stressed about other things. Like it's not like, oh, I have to have this new series succeed and be just as successful, or else I'm gonna, not be making enough money or have enough views or whatever to sustain myself. So yeah, I don't know. It's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, it's like it seems like the intentionality is the difference, because if you're just like, the difference between I'm trying a bunch of different things, but I'm intentionally going through it and having a completion point, rather than just like flailing around and just like, oh my gosh, what do I need to do? That didn't work. Let me try something else.
Yeah, and people respect it more as well when you make it clear that you have a completion point in mind. Because most people are just kind of bumbling around, short-term algorithmic pleasing, like, oh, if I can just get a 1 out of 10, if I can just get a 1 out of 10, and you can sort of sense that desperation. And I'm not very good at not doing that myself.
Yeah,
I have to actually try to not do.
Yeah, because it's like a lot of us on YouTube end up taking sort of like the American sitcom approach, where it's like, let me just ride this into the ground, for as long as I can. Which is like, that's what I'm doing on my channel. But I guess the luxury, though, is that you can make other series that are different, but sort of the same. And you're not just writing one thing all the way. But yeah, again, it's like, how do you give this advice to someone who's like a singer-songwriter? It's like, you should try a bunch of different genres and see which one sticks. It's like, dude, I'm playing open mic nights. Like, this is not helpful. So what do you like? What's the most different like kind of art or medium that you have come across when giving your coaching services to people?
In terms of like different mediums, it's like I end up always going back to sort of, how can we turn this into social media? But I guess the most interesting I worked with is like a woman who basically paints. She does like body painting, and then will like sing a song about the so she'll like, the visuals will be her painting something, sometimes herself, and then she will have written a song that she's playing in the background. So that was like the most interesting, probably, that I can remember in recent memory. And she has like a lot of great work that came of that, including one where she sits in front of a green screen, paints herself green, slowly disappears. And then,
interesting.
Yeah, and then paints herself back into reality. That's a good one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's great. I mean, and that is like very different than someone who's just like making videos on YouTube, where it's easy to be like, oh, just, trick the algorithm into giving you views,
Yeah.
Because then there's also like completely different systems of what is successful or not. Yeah,
for sure. And she could have turned that into a full-time thing with making art, like just selling the art on Etsy afterwards, and people would have bought it. But I think with her, there was probably that resistance of asking for people for money for the art, and that was something that we had to get through. But yeah.
Let's see. Well, we can cut this part out, but with the remaining time, like, what should we touch on to wrap up? If there's any way to put a bow on it, or it doesn't have to come together.
Anything I'm involved with is not going to have any kind of bow on it.
Yeah.
Let me think. Let's talk about personality types and how it relates to art. Because like we talked about, so if you're like overly high conscientiousness, it's bad. Because your perfection bar is too high and you might not get anything out. If you're too low in conscientiousness, you just don't care and you're like, whatever, I'll do it eventually, and you never do it. So just like centrism, it's always best to be in the middle at all times for the conscientiousness. Openness, yeah, like I associate, like I'm obviously high openness, and then that's associated with like being like really weird as an artist, really like strange, like maybe even too strange.
Yeah.
And then if you're too low in openness, you don't have any artistic inclination in the first place. Right. So again, you want to be right in the middle.
Yeah. Although there is an element to openness where it allows you like more ability to in the emotional realm kind of like synthesize what it might feel like to be someone else in a different situation, to get like really into the work emotionally.
Yep. That's how schizophrenia, too high openness.
Oh, well,
because then, you're so high in openness, you're making so many lateral moves, you can just become anybody. That's what happens in a psychotic break. This is why everything's connected, by the way. But you can become like, you're like Jesus, and then you're like a historical figure from the 1700s, and you're not getting very deep into any of those. You're just, schizophrenia is pure laterality. We could get into it, but we're not going to. And then autism is pure verticality. But
well, it's true. Like, that there is the I don't know what the psychological term is, but yeah, with autism, it is like the lack of the ability to put yourself into the other person's perspective.
That's a theory of mine. The autism, schizophrenia, autismophrenia spectrum. Yeah. So no, it's very true. So that's openness. Okay, hold on. What about extroversion? What do we think about that in terms of art?
The thing there is, like, I feel like the stereotypical artist is more introverted because it's like more introspective or whatever.
Yeah.
But extroversion is like, it can only help you when it comes time to put your work out there, to feel positive about what you're working on, because it's like the sensitivity to positive emotion. And I feel like if you're really low in extroversion, it's easy to just be like unmotivated because you don't feel very excited about anything or enthusiastic.
I think a lot of people watching who are low in extroversion will be helped by me, because I will allow them to market themselves and put themselves out there in a way that isn't comfortable for them. And if you're high in extroversion, then I'll be your friend.
Yes. We just talk a bunch about, and then agreeableness, would that play? I guess it would, if it was like, that maybe can go to the whole element of seeking the external validation versus just doing what you want. Although I feel like you could still be high in agreeableness and do whatever you want. If we go to Myers-Briggs, then that's sort of like the introverted judging function versus extroverted. So it's like the FEs and TEs are going to always be more outward focused on, is this working for other people? Do other people like this? Whereas the TIs and FIs are going to be the artists who, I feel like there's like more, they're like the baseball player who either hits a home run or strikes out because they're so committed to whatever they're doing that it can either be really good, or it's like no one cares about it because they've just like totally missed other people's.
Like if you stumble upon it yourself, it's such a pure, unrefined artistic thing. But it often doesn't work. I don't know. I think for I think actually agreeableness is sometimes manifests as like, for in terms of resistance, because that's the lens I'm seeing this through, is like it manifests as I can't make my art because my mom wouldn't like it, and like a hyper disagreeable person wouldn't think like that. They'd be like, no, I don't care. She's gonna have to like it because I'm putting it out anyway, and that's how it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I feel like agreeableness can be used as an excuse to you're maybe a little too overly concerned with what the repercussions of you making the kind of art that you want to make would be, especially if it's the sort of art that might be a little socially disruptive. And that's something I have to get over as well when I'm doing something that is a little bit, I don't know, socially disruptive or cringe or whatever. Like I have to just push through that, and it doesn't really come naturally to me. Especially like, let's say JJ has this problem as well. Like he has troubles doing man on the street interviews because he doesn't want to bother anybody.
Yeah.
But yeah, like sometimes you know, sometimes this perceived agreeableness can get in the way. And I'm just talking from the agreeableness perspective because I'm more agreeable.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that can definitely get in the way for sure.
Yeah, it's true. Like if you're too agreeable, you don't want to, like, I like the man on the street stuff. I can't even like watch it because I'm just like, oh no, don't bother those people. But even just like putting stuff out there that could offend people or could just present a different viewpoint can be very tough if you're too agreeable. And then I guess we can just wrap it up with neuroticism, which
as high as possible.
high as possible. Yeah. I am set.
Yeah. I think being a little neurotic is good as an artist. I think being at least a little bit, because like being aware of the negative or the anxiety inducing or depressive aspects of life makes your art more meaningful and relatable. Right. And if you don't have that, you're just like, I don't relate a lot to artists who just make songs about like slice of life, everything's great all the time, funny, ha ha ha, and like never ever talk about their bad days. Because I have so many bad days that like it's just not relatable to me. Like my art, what I want to do with my art is communicate some helpful or emotional truths. And if you're not even aware of the problems that most people are going through, then how can you? But anyway, I'm just highly neurotic, so I'm just justifying my existence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think what we learned from that is the guy who wrote Bad Day, hit song from 2005, high neuroticism.
Yes, I know what that is because I was listening to it in 2005. Yeah. I definitely was not 8.
Oh man, I am getting old. Yeah, it is a bit weird when you get to that age where you're like, this person was born in a year where I consider that to be not that long ago.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a great conversation. We didn't put a bow on it, so
that's par for the course.
It leaves people wanting more. That's the whole thing. That's number 2.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's exactly how it'll go. Well, I always love talking to you, Frank James. You're a breath of fresh air in my life.
Well, thanks. I always like talking to you, Greg, and I like when you coach me and make my life better by giving me advice that I can use artistically.
Right, and I like when you subtly help me out with my own coaching endeavors by saying things like that.
That you can put into your very sincere commercial.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So we will say goodbye for the podcast purposes so that it sounds like we ended it like a professional podcast. Goodbye, Greg.
Bye, Frank. Bye for podcast purposes.